The first time I met Cheryl from the HOA, she was yelling at my mailbox. No joke. I had just moved into the Lakeside Pines development 3 weeks earlier, and Cheryl, the self-appointed queen of the HOA board, was standing in front of my house, jabbering into her phone about how the font size on the street number violated code. I thought she was calling a friend. Turns out, she was reporting me to the HOA Aesthetic Compliance Committee. I'm Brandon Cole, 42, widowed, and recently retired from the military. I bought this house to give my daughter Paige, who just turned 24 and recently joined the city's police force, a quiet place to crash between shifts, big backyard, peaceful lake, and supposedly a tight-knit community. What I didn't know was that the HOA was less of a community and more of a dictatorship with a freshly bleached bob haircut and a clipboard. Now, Cheryl wasn't just on the board. She was the board. President, treasurer, secretary, all of it. And she wore her power like a badge. It all blew up on a sunny Saturday morning when Paige decided to fish off the little dock behind our backyard. She had the day off, and after the last few months of dealing with street-level chaos, she just wanted some peace and maybe a base or two. I was inside fixing lunch when I heard the yelling. "Excuse me, that is not allowed. You are trespassing." I jogged out and saw Cheryl storming down the slope toward our dock, phone already in hand, sunglasses perched like armor. "Hey, that's my daughter," I called out. "She lives here. We back onto the lake, Cheryl. Remember, she is fishing in a non-designated area. That is a violation of HOA Policy 3.7b, sub-point 6. I looked at Paige, who had earbuds in and was calmly reeling in her line like Cheryl wasn't even barking at her. "Relax, Cheryl. She's not hurting anyone." She ignored me. "You better believe I'm calling the authorities. This is illegal. I have it all on camera." I stepped down toward her. "You're calling 911 because someone is fishing off their own property?" "It's not her property," Cheryl snapped. "The lakefront is HOA-controlled land. This is a criminal act." "You're insane," I muttered. She had already dialed. "Hello, yes. I'd like to report a suspicious individual trespassing and illegally fishing. She's being aggressive. I feel threatened." My mouth dropped open. "You feel threatened? She hasn't even said a word to you." But Cheryl wasn't interested in facts. She kept up the performance until the call ended with a smug, "Thank you. Please hurry." I looked at Paige. She had taken out her earbuds now and was watching Cheryl like she was inspecting roadkill. "You good?" I asked. "Oh, I'm good," she said. About 6 minutes later, a cruiser rolled up. Cheryl practically sprinted to it. "She's still down there. She refused to leave. I want her removed and cited." The officer stepped out. Young guy, rookie by the looks of it. He walked down the path, heading toward Paige. And then he stopped. "Officer Cole?" Paige stood up and grinned. "Hey, Martinez." Cheryl's face twisted like someone had just slapped her with a wet sock. What?" she stuttered. "Officer." Paige pulled her badge from her back pocket. "That's right. City of Brook Hill PD. Off duty. Fishing on private property. My dad owns the deed. Want to see it?" The young officer looked like he wanted to melt into the grass. No, that won't be necessary." Cheryl's face went red. She didn't identify herself as law enforcement. She didn't have to. She wasn't violating anything, I said calmly. "And by the way, you just made a false report to 911. That's a crime, Cheryl." She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. "Hope you like paperwork," Paige said cheerfully. Cheryl turned and stormed off, practically tripping over her own rage. I looked at Paige. "Think she'll try something else?" Paige reeled in her line and looked toward the HOA clubhouse. "Oh, definitely," she said. "But next time, I'll bring the body cam." 2 days after the fishing incident, I found a certified letter from the HOA stuffed into my mailbox. No envelope, no explanation, just folded and jammed between my electric bill and a flyer for gutter cleaning. Classic Cheryl. I opened it at the kitchen counter. Paige was on the couch in her academy sweats, sipping iced coffee and watching a wildlife documentary with the volume low. "You've got to be kidding me," I said, scanning the letter. "What now?" "She's fining us. Says we violated community shoreline protocol by allowing a non-board approved activity within HOA-controlled easement boundaries." Paige leaned her head back against the cushion. She really tossed the whole thesaurus at that one, didn't she? I handed her the paper. $200. Due in 5 days. Threatens a lien if unpaid. She raised both eyebrows. "That's cute." I folded the letter and slid it into a folder already labeled HOA nonsense. It was getting thicker by the week. The next evening, I walked over to my neighbor Aaron's place. He's a welder by trade and the kind of guy who fixes his own roof without a harness. He's also lived in the neighborhood longer than anyone else on our street. When I got to his garage, he was tuning up an old Harley with the radio low and a cold beer sweating on the workbench. "She's at it again," I said. He didn't even look up. "Let me guess. A fine. $200 for shoreline protocol violations." He chuckled and wiped his hands on a rag. "Same garbage she pulled on the Alvarados last spring. Tried to tell them their grandkids couldn't launch kayaks from their own backyard." "What happened?" "Carlos's sister is a zoning inspector. She torched that fine in about 5 minutes. Cheryl backed off, but she's slippery. Never hits the same house twice in a row." I leaned against the workbench. "You ever think about running for the board?" He snorted. "I'd rather eat roofing nails." That night I did some digging. The HOA bylaws were a mess, half-scanned PDFs, the rest typed in Comic Sans with outdated contact info. But the key detail caught my eye around page 34. "Access easement boundaries extending from lakeside properties shall be maintained by the homeowners and are not subject to recreational restriction unless safety is compromised." In plain English, the board can't ban fishing from your own dock unless there's a real safety issue. And Cheryl had nothing. The next morning, I printed 3 copies of that clause, highlighted it, and dropped one in her mailbox. By noon, she rang the doorbell. I opened the door to find her standing stiffly in a lemon-colored pantsuit, holding the paper like it was radioactive. "This," she said, "is not how we resolve things in Lakeside Pines." "I agree," I said, "which is why I'm asking you formally to rescind the fine." Her eyes narrowed. "You're new here, Mr. Cole. You may not understand how things work. I understand due process. You issued a fine with no legal basis. That's not how things work." She crossed her arms. "You're undermining the authority of the board." "No," I said. "I'm refusing to pay an illegitimate charge." "Big difference." She didn't blink. "You're on thin ice." I laughed once. "You're in violation of your own bylaws." That night, Paige dropped an idea while we were eating takeout. "You know, if she keeps this up, we could file for a formal audit." I looked up from my noodles. "The books." She nodded. "Public funds. Dues collection. She's the only one with access to the HOA account, right? As far as I can tell. Then she's not just overreaching. She's running a one-woman bank." That stuck with me. The next few days were quiet, too quiet. No letters, no notes, no angry rants from across the cul-de-sac. Cheryl had gone to ground. Then, Saturday morning, I got a knock at the door. It wasn't Cheryl. It was a man in a navy suit, holding a manila envelope. He introduced himself as Alan Berg from the county tax assessor's office. He asked if I had a few minutes. He stepped inside and laid the envelope on the table. "Your HOA submitted a property boundary adjustment request 2 weeks ago," he said. We flagged it because it appeared to shift public access easement lines farther into your yard. I stared at him. She tried to redraw my property line? He opened the folder and slid out a map. This is what was submitted. If it had gone through automatically, you'd have lost about 10 feet of shoreline use. 10 feet of your own backyard, effectively. I leaned over the map. The red line cut through my dock. Is that even legal? Not unless the homeowner consents. And you didn't, so we're rejecting the request. But I'd advise you to keep an eye out. If she submitted this once, she might try again under a different pretext. After he left, I called Paige. She didn't answer. 2 minutes later, she walked in the front door, holding a small white envelope. Found this taped to my car window, she said. Inside was a printed notice. Your presence has been deemed disruptive to community harmony. You are hereby requested not to loiter on HOA-controlled property. Repeat violations will be escalated. She held it up. She just told a police officer not to loiter in her own driveway. I took a deep breath. Time to go on offense. That evening, I walked door to door with a clipboard and a stack of forms I printed from the HOA's own website. They were petitions, one for requesting a financial audit, another for calling a special election. Most neighbors didn't even blink. Some were waiting for the chance. I've been trying to get her out for 2 years, said Mrs. Tran, who lived across the street. She fined me for planting pink roses instead of white ones. She told my son he couldn't skateboard in our own driveway, said another guy, shaking his head. By the end of the weekend, I had 32 signatures. Just enough. On Monday, I filed both petitions with the city's HOA oversight liaison. Yes, that's a real office. And yes, they were very interested in the boundary adjustment attempt. 3 days later, Cheryl called an emergency board meeting. Paige and I showed up 10 minutes early. The clubhouse smelled like expired potpourri and desperation. Cheryl was already there, flanked by 2 people I'd never seen before, both wearing fake smiles and holding manila folders. She cleared her throat. This meeting is to address recent confusion regarding administrative procedures. There has been, excuse me, I said, holding up a thumb drive. I just emailed the city HOA liaison a copy of this recording. This from your last board meeting. The one where you mention, quote, adjusting lakeside boundaries before the new owners catch on. One of the folder holders looked up sharply. I didn't authorize any such thing, Cheryl said quickly. That must be out of context. I'd be happy to play the full audio, I replied. But I think the part where you also mention using fine revenue to redecorate the clubhouse without a vote is pretty clear. Paige stepped forward and handed the other board members a printed page. You're all named in the audit request. You can either cooperate or you can lawyer up. Your choice. There was a long pause. Then one of them stood up and walked out without a word. Cheryl looked like she was trying to swallow her own tongue. We're done here, I said. Paige tilted her head toward the door. You might want to call your own attorney. And maybe the city too. Pretty sure submitting falsified boundary documents counts as fraud. We walked out into the evening air, the lake glinting behind us. For the first time since moving in, things felt quiet, peaceful. Paige glanced over. Think she'll try again? Not if she's got any sense, I said. She laughed once. So, probably. The day after the emergency board meeting, Cheryl's front yard was unusually quiet. No clipboard, no garden shears, no passive-aggressive flags about community pride. Her porch light was still on at 9 in the morning, which told me 2 things: she hadn't slept, and she was probably watching the neighborhood from behind those dusty blinds. I didn't care. I had bigger things to deal with. A voicemail had landed on my phone at dawn from the city's HOA Financial Oversight Division. A formal audit of the Lakeside Pines HOA accounts had been approved and scheduled. Not just a routine check. A forensic review. Cheryl's attempt to forge boundary lines had triggered enough suspicion that the city escalated things to the county auditor's office. And now they were sending in a full team. This was no longer about fines or dock access. This was about embezzlement. I walked next door to Aaron's house with 2 mugs of coffee. He opened the door in a grease-stained flannel shirt and a look that said he hadn't gone to bed yet. "What happened?" he asked, stepping aside. "The city's moving in. Audit's happening Monday. It's not just Cheryl anymore. They're pulling records going back 5 years." He closed the door behind me. "She's gonna blow a gasket. She already tried to move HOA funds into a personal account. The bank flagged it and reported it to the city." He blinked. "Wait, what?" I nodded. "Got the tip from a contact at the auditor's office this morning. She tried to transfer $32,000 under the justification of landscape upgrades. But the account she was moving it to belongs to her niece, who lives in another state." Aaron let out a whistle. "That's not just shady. That's jail time." I handed him one of the coffees. "They're freezing the HOA's finances pending investigation. No more fines. No more community improvement surcharges. Everything stops. You tell Paige yet? She's at a city training today, but she'll find out soon enough." Aaron took a long sip, then shook his head. "I always figured Cheryl was power-hungry, but I didn't think she was stealing actual money. Turns out, she's been doing it for years. Just small enough amounts to go unnoticed." That afternoon, I got a knock on the door. A man in a brown leather jacket and a badge clipped to his belt introduced himself as Detective Halvorsen with the county's white-collar crimes unit. He was polite but direct. "We're collecting statements from residents who've had financial interactions with the HOA, especially those involving fines or property modification fees." "I've got a folder full," I said, stepping aside. "Come on in." He sat at the dining table while I laid out every letter, notice, and email I'd saved since moving in. He flipped through them like a lawyer prepping for cross-examination. "She fined you for shoreline use. Cited a regulation that doesn't exist anymore. Then tried to redraw the property line. That's a pattern. She also called the cops on my daughter under false pretenses." "Yeah," he said, looking up. "We got the dispatch tape. It's not a good look. She claimed my daughter was aggressive. She never even spoke to her." He nodded once. "False emergency call, forged financial documents, attempted misappropriation of funds. That's not just overreach. That's criminal." As he left, he handed me a card. "If she tries to contact you directly about anything, call me. We've already issued a request for her financials. If she tampers with anything, we'll move to arrest." By sunset, word had spread. Neighbors were talking over fences. Kids were biking past Cheryl's house in slow loops, pointing at the empty flagpole and the dead planters that had once been her pride. No one had seen her all day. But then, around 10 that night, someone rang my doorbell. I opened the door and found Cheryl standing there. Hair undone, eyes sunken, blouse wrinkled like she'd been sleeping in it. She didn't hold a clipboard, just a piece of paper. "I need to speak with you," she said. Not demanded, not ordered, asked. For the first time, I stepped out and closed the door behind me. "I don't think that's a good idea." "Please," she said, voice cracking. "Just a minute." Against my better judgment, I walked with her to the sidewalk. She handed me the paper. It was a typed letter signed at the bottom. "I'm resigning from the board," she said quietly. "Effective immediately." I read the first few lines. "You're not doing this out of the kindness of your heart." "No," she admitted. "I'm doing it because the city froze the accounts and the detective told me they're pulling my emails. They have no idea what's actually mine and what's not. I thought if I stepped down, maybe they'd go easy. They won't. She looked up at me. Do you think they'll charge me? I think they already are. She nodded slowly, then turned and walked back toward her house, letter still in my hand. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Paige came home early from training. She dropped her gym bag by the door and raised an eyebrow. Why's Cheryl's car gone? She resigned last night, packed up this morning, left a note on her door saying she's taking a leave of absence to focus on personal matters. That's one way to put it. I handed her the letter. She read it, then set it down. You think she's gone for good? No. But she won't be in charge when she comes back. At noon, a city van rolled up to the clubhouse. 3 auditors in polos and khakis stepped out, carrying boxes and laptops. One of them nodded at me as they passed. I watched them unlock the door and disappear inside. By 3, a patrol car pulled in behind them. Not Paige's. Someone from the white-collar unit. They stayed for over an hour. That night, I walked to the end of the cul-de-sac with Aaron and a few other neighbors. The clubhouse windows were still lit. Feels like we should do something, Aaron said. Like what? He looked around. Elect a real board. Someone who doesn't treat the neighborhood like it's their personal fiefdom. You volunteering? He laughed. I weld steel all day. I don't have the patience for meetings. One of the other neighbors, a retired teacher named Marlene, raised her hand. I'll do it. I've managed charter school budgets. How hard can it be? I smiled. Now we're talking. The next morning, I drafted a flyer. Community meeting rebuilding Lakeside Pines. We posted it on every mailbox, every bulletin board, even slipped a few under doors. When the meeting rolled around that Saturday afternoon, more than 50 people showed up. Folding chairs spread across the clubhouse floor. I recognized almost everyone and not a single one looked bored. I nominate Marlene for interim treasurer, I said from the front of the room. Seconded. Unanimous vote. We filled the rest of the positions in under 30 minutes. No one argued. No one nominated themselves twice. It felt honest, like a reset. After the votes, Paige stood up. I'm not here to make speeches, but I will say this: what happened here wasn't just about rules or fines. It was about control. And that control was never legit. It only worked because we didn't push back. Now we have. And we're not going to stop. The room broke into applause. That night, I stood on the lawn with her, watching the lake ripple under the moonlight. Feels different, she said. It is. You think she'll come back? Probably. Then what? I looked at her. Then we show her what a real community looks like. She nodded, then reeled in her invisible fishing rod with a grin. The water lapped gently against the dock. For once, there was no shouting, no threats, no patrol cars, just peace. Earned. The morning the charges were announced, the sky over Lakeside Pines was the kind of dull gray that made everything look like a black and white photo. I was standing at the edge of the dock, sipping coffee and watching a heron pick its way through the reeds, when Paige stepped outside with her phone pressed to her ear, and a look that made it clear something big had dropped. She didn't speak until she hung up. They're charging Cheryl with 3 felonies, she said. I turned. Which ones? Wire fraud, falsifying municipal documents, and misappropriation of funds from a civic organization, and 2 misdemeanor counts of filing a false police report. I nodded once and set my mug down on the railing. She's being arrested this afternoon. They're doing it quietly, but it's happening. I didn't ask how she knew. Paige didn't volunteer sources unless necessary, and I didn't need to know the specifics. What mattered was that this wasn't just going to be a slap on the wrist. The city had taken the bait, followed the paper trail, and found more than just a few shady fines and power trips. She's not the only one, Paige added. One of her old board members is being investigated too. The guy who signed off on the landscaping invoices? Turns out he owns the company. That caught my attention. Wait. The one who brought in the crew that never showed up. She nodded. Billing for services never rendered. They padded charges for lawn treatment, tree trimming, even fake invoices for pest control. That clubhouse budget? It was a front. How much are we talking? Close to 90,000 over 4 years. All skimmed from dues. Split between them. I picked up my mug again, but the coffee had cooled. Didn't matter. So what happens next? Arraignment. Bail hearing. Then the city's going to appoint a temporary oversight administrator. We'll have to submit our new board structure to them for approval. They'll approve it. She glanced toward the clubhouse. They'd better. Later that day, a black SUV with county plates rolled up just after 2, parked at the head of Cheryl's driveway. 2 plainclothes officers stepped out, calm, no rush. One knocked. The other stood back with a clipboard. After a long pause, the front door opened. Cheryl appeared in a plain blouse, no jewelry, hair tied back. No clipboard. No accessories. Just silence. The cuffs weren't visible from where we stood. But the way she stepped into the SUV without protest told the whole story. Aaron wandered over from his garage, wiping his hands with a towel. So it's official? I nodded. She's going to be arraigned in the morning. He didn't say anything for a second. Then he reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Got this in the mail 2 days ago. Dated before she resigned. I unfolded it. A violation notice. Uncut lawn edges. Fine. $125. She had the nerve to send you this? He shrugged. Figured you'd want it for the file. I tucked it under my arm. We'll hand it over to the audit team. Might help them build out the timeline. That evening, the new board held its first official meeting under the oversight of the city-appointed administrator, a woman named Lucinda Marsh. She was sharp, efficient, and had the kind of no-nonsense tone that made even the chatty neighbors sit up straight. You've made significant progress, she said, glancing around the room. Community votes logged properly, financial records turned over without obstruction, and all outstanding fines paused pending review. That's more than most transitional boards accomplish in 3 months. Marlene, now officially our treasurer, adjusted her glasses. We've got a long way to go. Lucinda nodded. Yes, but you're not alone anymore. She handed out a packet. This is a proposal for restructuring your bylaw enforcement procedures. No more unilateral notices. No more single-person oversight. Violations will require a 3-person review and documented evidence. You'll also need to host quarterly open meetings for budget transparency. Paige leaned forward. What about restitution? For residents who were fined under false pretenses. Lucinda turned to Paige. That's next. Once the audit is complete, the city will coordinate reimbursements. Some of the funds may be recovered through asset seizure, assuming the court rules accordingly. Aaron looked up. So if Cheryl has a boat or something? Lucinda didn't smile, but her eyes glinted. It may end up paying for your new clubhouse roof. By the end of the week, Cheryl had posted bail. Her attorney issued a bland statement about misunderstandings and administrative errors, but the damage was done. Her house sat dark, mailbox taped shut, lawn beginning to yellow. The neighborhood, however, had never looked more alive. Kids played in driveways without glares. Dogs barked freely. Neighbors waved without the tight, forced smiles. New planters appeared beside mailboxes. Someone even painted a picnic table near the lake. At the next community meeting, Paige stood and addressed the room. We're not here to govern with fear or threats, she said. We're here to preserve what makes this place worth living in. That means fairness and accountability From now on, if you get a violation, it'll come with photos, signatures, and an option to appeal. No more whisper campaigns. No more surprise fines. Applause rippled through the room. Even the older residents clapped, some wiping their eyes. After the meeting, people lingered. Conversations broke out in small groups. Laughter drifted across the clubhouse lawn. Someone rolled out a cooler and passed around sodas. Marlene joined me near the snack table. "You know," she said, "I used to dread these meetings. Now I'm thinking we should make them potlucks. Just make sure someone brings peach cobbler." Aaron called from across the room. Paige leaned against the railing beside me, arms crossed, face relaxed for the first time in weeks. "I don't think she ever thought anyone would push back," she said. "Bullies never do. What do you think will happen to her? She'll go to trial, maybe take a plea deal. She might avoid prison, but she won't touch another HOA board again. That's certain." "She really thought she could control everything," Paige said. "Even the lake." I looked out over the water, calm, reflecting the soft lights from the clubhouse windows. Water doesn't take orders. The next morning, I found a small envelope taped to the dock railing. Inside was a handwritten note. "Thank you for standing up. For all of us. M." There was no return address, but I recognized the handwriting. Mrs. Tran. She'd never said much during meetings, but she always listened, and apparently she'd been paying close attention. Later that day, a landscaping crew showed up to finally fix the common path Cheryl had claimed was too expensive to maintain. Turns out, the funds had been there all along, just redirected into personal purchases. The receipts had included patio furniture, a designer handbag, and a sunroom renovation in her niece's home 3 states away. The crew worked fast. Within hours, the path was cleared, leveled, and regraveled. Kids rode their bikes down it all afternoon. As the sun dipped below the trees, I joined Paige on the dock again. She'd brought 2 fishing rods this time. The water was quiet, just the occasional splash, the buzz of a dragonfly, the creak of the dock under our feet. "Feel like casting a line?" she asked. I took the rod. "Why not?" We sat there for a long while, lines drifting in lazy arcs, silence stretching between us. Not tense, not watchful, just peaceful. A few houses down, someone had set out lawn chairs and a small portable speaker. Music drifted across the lake. Soft, old-school soul. No one told them to turn it down. No one wrote a complaint. No one called the cops. The HOA had been rebuilt. The neighborhood had reclaimed itself. And Cheryl? She was just another name in a court docket now. Cautionary tale. A reminder of what happens when power is taken, not earned. Paige reeled in her line, checked the bait, and cast again. "I think we're gonna be okay," she said. I watched the line ripple through the water. "We already are."